What if the single biggest obstacle standing between you and a fulfilling life is not the world around you, but something hidden within your own mind? Why do so many of us fear rejection so deeply, whether it's the rejection of a partner, a friend, a family member, or even society at large? This fear is universal. It shapes our relationships, our careers, even our creativity, and it can paralyze us. But over a century ago, two of the most influential thinkers in psychology, Sigmund Freud and Gustav Jung, began to unravel the mystery. They asked, why do human beings crave acceptance so desperately? What unconscious forces make us insecure? And how can we break free from this cycle of fear? In this video, we'll dive into Freud's ideas of unconscious defense mechanisms, Jung's insights into archetypes in the shadow, and discover how both can guide us toward overcoming the fear of rejection. By the end, you'll not only understand where this fear comes from, but also how to transform it into strength. If this inspires you, please subscribe, leave a like, and comment with your own perspective. Let's dive in. Part 1. Freud, the roots of insecurity. To begin understanding the fear of rejection, we must travel back to the late 19th century, when a man named Sigmund Freud began exploring the hidden depths of the human mind. Freud proposed something radical for his time, that most of what drives us, our desires, fears, and anxieties, lies beneath the surface of conscious thought. He called this hidden realm the unconscious. Now, according to Freud, the fear of rejection doesn't simply appear in adulthood when we face criticism, heartbreak, or loneliness. Instead, its roots stretch back into our earliest years of life. Think about a child, vulnerable, dependent, and hungry for affection. The child's survival depends on being accepted by parents or caregivers. If that love feels uncertain, if the child senses withdrawal, criticism, or conditional approval, the seed of rejection anxiety is planted. Over time, this fear becomes buried, but it never disappears. It lingers in the unconscious, shaping how we see ourselves and how we relate to others. Freud argued that many of our adult struggles are echoes of these early experiences of acceptance and rejection. But the unconscious is not passive. It fights to protect us from pain. And here, Freud introduced one of his most influential ideas, defense mechanisms. These are strategies our mind uses, often without us knowing, to shield us from the full impact of emotional wounds. Let's explore some of these defenses and how they play into our fear of rejection. Denial. Imagine being turned down for a date or excluded from a group. Instead of admitting how painful it feels, the mind says, "It doesn't matter. I didn't care anyway." Denial numbs the pain by pretending the rejection has no power. Rationalization. Suppose you apply for a job and don't get it. Instead of facing the sting of being overlooked, you tell yourself, "That company wasn't good enough for me." Rationalization makes rejection seem logical, not personal. Projection. This is when we attribute our own fears to others. For instance, if you secretly worry that you're not interesting, you might conclude, "They rejected me because they're shallow," when in reality, you are projecting your insecurity outward. Repression. This goes even deeper. Painful experiences of rejection are pushed so far into the unconscious that we forget them, but repression doesn't erase them. Instead, they influence us silently, in patterns of avoidance, self-doubt, or mistrust. At first glance, these defenses seem useful. They allow us to survive moments of rejection without being overwhelmed. But Freud warned of the hidden cost. By relying too much on defense mechanisms, we distance ourselves from the truth. We never fully process the wound, and so it continues to govern our behavior from the shadows. For example, someone who has repressed repeated childhood rejection may grow into an adult who avoids close relationships altogether. Their unconscious whispers, "If you don't get too close, you won't be hurt." Another person might overcompensate, working obsessively for success, constantly seeking validation because deep down, they are terrified of being dismissed. Freud would argue that until we bring these unconscious strategies into awareness, we remain their prisoner. We repeat the same cycles of fear and insecurity, often without knowing why. So in Freud's view, the fear of rejection is not just a simple reaction to the present moment. It is an ancient echo, a childhood fear woven into the unconscious, protected by defenses that both shield us and trap us. To overcome it, Freud believed, we must confront the hidden forces shaping our lives. Only by recognizing these unconscious defenses can we begin to loosen their grip and face rejection not as a devastating wound, but as a human experience we can survive. Part 2. Jung, the shadow and the social self. If Freud uncovered the hidden defenses that protect us from rejection, his student and later rival, Carl Gustav Jung, took the exploration even further. Jung believed that our fear of rejection is not just personal. It is deeply connected to something far older, something rooted in the collective human experience. Jung introduced the concept of the collective unconscious, a universal layer of the psyche shared by all humanity, filled with ancient patterns he called archetypes. These archetypes, like the hero, the mother, the trickster, shape the way we think, dream, and behave, even if we don't realize it. When it comes to rejection, Jung pointed us toward two especially important ideas: the shadow and the persona. Let's start with the shadow. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves we do not want to see. These are the qualities we push away because we fear they will make us unlovable, unacceptable, or unworthy. Think of a person who was taught as a child that expressing anger is dangerous. That anger doesn't vanish. Instead, it slips into the unconscious, becoming part of the shadow. Later in life, that person may struggle to assert themselves, terrified that showing anger will cause rejection, or they may project their repressed anger onto others, seeing hostility everywhere. The shadow can contain not only our so-called negative traits like jealousy, greed, or fear, but also our hidden strengths. Sometimes even ambition, creativity, or confidence can be rejected parts of the self if early life experiences taught us that these qualities would not be accepted. And here is the paradox. The more we hide the shadow, the stronger it becomes. The fear of rejection intensifies because we live in constant anxiety that others will see through the mask and discover the parts we're trying to bury. Which brings us to the second concept, the persona. For Jung, the persona is the mask we wear to face society. It is the version of ourselves we present to the world in order to fit in, to be accepted, and most importantly, to avoid rejection. The persona can be useful. After all, we all need a social identity to navigate daily life. But when we cling to the mask too tightly, we risk losing touch with our authentic self. Imagine someone who constantly plays the role of the perfect friend, always agreeable, never disagreeing, always available. This persona may win approval, but deep down, that person may feel empty, unseen, even resentful. Why? Because their true thoughts and emotions are hidden behind the mask. When rejection comes, and it inevitably does, it feels catastrophic. If all we have is the persona, then rejection feels like the destruction of our entire identity. Jung's answer to this dilemma is not to throw away the persona. We still need it to function in society, but to balance it with authenticity, to realize that the persona is just a mask, not the whole of who we are. And most importantly, Jung invites us to turn toward the shadow rather than away from it. He believed that personal growth, what he called individuation, comes from integrating the hidden parts of ourselves. When we shine light on the shadow, we reclaim the qualities we once rejected. We discover that what we feared would cause others to abandon us is often the very thing that makes us whole. For example, a person who embraces their suppressed anger may transform it into healthy assertiveness. Someone who accepts their vulnerability may find deeper intimacy with others. By making peace with a shadow, we reduce its power to control us. And when we no longer reject ourselves, the sting of rejection from others begins to lose its grip. So, while Freud shows us the defenses that mask our fear, Jung challenges us to go deeper. He tells us, you fear rejection not only because of what others may see in you, but because of what you refuse to see in yourself. To overcome rejection, then, is not only about changing how others respond to us, it is about facing our shadow, loosening the mask of the persona, and daring to live as a more complete, authentic self. Part 3. The psychology of social insecurity. So far, we've explored Freud's vision of the unconscious, where defense mechanisms protect us from the pain of rejection, and Jung's exploration of the shadow and the persona, which show us how much of ourselves we hide in order to be accepted. But what happens when these ideas collide in everyday life? This is where we begin to understand the psychology of social insecurity. At its core, social insecurity is the belief, if people see the real me, they will reject me. It is the silent fear behind awkward silences, overthinking, and self-doubt. And it is reinforced both by Freud's defenses and Jung's masks. Let's break this down. From Freud's perspective, if I've experienced painful rejection in the past, my unconscious will work tirelessly to prevent it from happening again. Maybe I deny my needs, rationalize failure, or repress feelings of inadequacy. These defenses soften the blow, but they also keep me stuck, because as long as I use defenses, I never confront the deeper wound, the belief that I'm not worthy of belonging. From Jung's perspective, insecurity is magnified by the persona. The more tightly I cling to my social mask, the more fragile I become. If people reject the mask, it feels like they are rejecting my entire being. And meanwhile, the shadow grows larger, whispering, "You're hiding who you really are. If they knew the truth, they'd leave you." This tension creates a cycle. I fear rejection. I hide behind a mask. I repress parts of myself. I feel more inauthentic. And because I feel fake, I become even more afraid of being exposed. Insecurity feeds itself. You can probably recognize this cycle in small, everyday situations. Think about the times you've hesitated to speak up in a group, worrying that others will judge your opinion. Or the moments you've replayed a conversation over and over in your head, fearing you said something wrong. These are not just random thoughts. They are the surface symptoms of much deeper psychological patterns. And here's something both Freud and Jung would agree on. Rejection stings so much because it threatens our very sense of identity. It doesn't just say, "I don't like your idea." It whispers, "You are not enough, you do not belong." For Freud, that threat awakens old childhood anxieties of abandonment. For Jung, it triggers the shadow and destabilizes the persona. The conscious mind feels shaken, but it is the unconscious that reacts most violently. This is why the fear of rejection is so powerful. It's not only about the social situation in front of us. It's about layers upon layers of unconscious memories, defenses, masks, and hidden selves, all colliding in a single moment of vulnerability. The tragedy, of course, is that the more we fear rejection, the more we isolate ourselves. We avoid risks, we silence our voices, we conform to expectations, and in doing so, we often create the very rejection we were trying to escape. We lose connection, not because others reject us, but because we reject our true selves. This is the prison of social insecurity, and unless we confront both the defenses Freud described and the shadow Jung revealed, we remain locked inside. Part 4. Overcoming the Fear. Insights from Freud and Jung. We now understand how Freud and Jung explained the fear of rejection. Freud revealed the unconscious defenses that protect but also imprison us. Jung showed us the shadow and the persona, the hidden parts of ourselves and the masks we wear to be accepted. But the most important question remains, how do we overcome this fear? The answer lies in combining both Freud's and Jung's insights into a roadmap for self-awareness, healing, and authentic living. Step 1. Recognize your defenses. Freud would tell us that awareness is the first step to freedom. Begin by asking yourself, when I feel rejected, how do I protect myself? Do I deny my feelings and pretend I don't care? Do I rationalize the rejection, convincing myself it doesn't matter? Do I project my insecurity onto others, blaming them instead of looking inward? Or do I repress my emotions so deeply that I can't even name what I feel? By naming these defense mechanisms, you weaken their control. The moment you say, I'm rationalizing right now, you take back power. The defense no longer runs your life in secret. Step 2. Face the shadow. Jung would urge us to turn toward the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've hidden away. The fear of rejection often grows from self-rejection. I don't want others to see this side of me because I haven't accepted it myself. One powerful exercise is shadow journaling. Write down the traits in others that irritate you most. Ask, could these be qualities I've rejected in myself? Maybe you dislike someone's arrogance, yet deep down you're afraid of showing your own ambition. Or maybe you judge others for being emotional, when in truth you fear your own vulnerability. By identifying and reclaiming these traits, you begin to integrate the shadow. What once felt like a source of shame becomes a source of strength. Step 3. Loosen the mask of the persona. The persona, our social mask, is necessary but dangerous if we mistake it for our true self. The key is balance. Ask yourself, am I living for approval or am I living authentically? If you realize that your persona is suffocating you, experiment with showing more of your real self, even in small ways. Share an honest opinion. Express an unpopular idea. Allow yourself to disagree. At first it feels risky, but every time you reveal something authentic, you weaken the fear of rejection. You learn that rejection of the mask is not the rejection of your soul. Step 4. Reframe rejection. Both Freud and Jung would agree, rejection is not the end of the world. In fact, rejection is information. Freud might say, Rejection exposes the defenses you've been using. It shows you where the unconscious still rules. Jung might add, rejection reveals which environments, people, or groups are not aligned with your true self. It is not proof of your inadequacy. It is a filter, guiding you toward those who will embrace your authenticity. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" after rejection, try asking, "What does this rejection teach me about where I truly belong?" Step 5. Practice vulnerability in small steps. Fear shrinks when we face it gradually. Start small. Share something personal with a trusted friend. Express an idea online, knowing some may disagree. Speak up in a group where you normally stay silent. Every time you risk rejection and survive, you prove to yourself that you are stronger than the fear. Over time, vulnerability becomes a practice, not a threat. Step 6. Cultivate self-acceptance. At the deepest level, both Freud and Jung point us back to the same truth: the fear of rejection fades as we learn to accept ourselves. Freud teaches us to uncover the unconscious patterns that block us. Jung shows us how to embrace the shadow and loosen the persona. Together, they remind us true belonging begins within. When you accept your whole self, strengths and flaws, light and shadow, you no longer beg the world for approval. Rejection still stings, but it doesn't define you, because you have already chosen to belong to yourself. So, to overcome the fear of rejection, recognize your defenses, face your shadow, loosen the mask, reframe rejection as guidance, practice vulnerability, and above all, cultivate self-acceptance. Freud and Jung may have lived a century ago, but their insights remain alive today. They remind us that the real enemy is not rejection itself, but the unconscious patterns that make us fear it. By bringing awareness to our defenses and courage to embrace our hidden selves, we can step out of the cycle of insecurity and into a life of authenticity. Because in the end, the question is not, how do I stop others from rejecting me? The question is, can I accept myself so fully that rejection no longer controls me? Conclusion. The fear of rejection is one of humanity's oldest wounds. It is written into our biology. After all, for most of human history, to be cast out of the group meant danger, even death. But beyond biology, it is shaped by childhood, by culture, and most of all, by the hidden architecture of the unconscious mind. Freud showed us that this fear is protected by layers of defense mechanisms: denial, repression, projection, each one a shield that keeps us safe, but also keeps us trapped. Jung revealed that much of this fear is born from our own self-rejection, the shadow we refuse to face, the persona we cling to too tightly. Together, they remind us that rejection's power is not in the moment itself, but in the meaning we give it. Think about it. Rejection does not erase your worth. It does not define your future. What it does is strip away illusions, defenses, masks, expectations, and leave behind the raw truth of who you are. And that truth is not something to fear, it is something to embrace. Because only by facing rejection do we discover resilience. Only by letting go of the mask do we discover authenticity. And only by accepting the shadow do we discover wholeness. Freud once said, "Being entirely honest with oneself is a good exercise." Jung reminded us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Perhaps the way to overcome the fear of rejection is not to seek more acceptance from the world, but to give more acceptance to ourselves. Because in the end, the greatest rejection we can suffer is not from others, but from turning away from our own soul. And the greatest freedom we can find is to live authentically, even in the face of rejection. That is where belonging begins, and that is where fear ends.